Welcome back, everybody, to Higher Density Living. Yes, I'm repeating it because that's what we're doing here. We're trying to evolve. That's the whole point. Trying to learn.
Go to it's all about fourth density.
It's all about that fourth density for everybody.
Unity.
Yeah. It's unity. It's love.
I feel like unity in this world that we're living in, it almost seems like it's worse. But Raw talks about that, and we had done several episodes on fourth density. But Raw talks about it that it gets a little bit worse before it gets better.
Think about...
It's like resistance.
Oh, God, I feel like I can talk all day long. Think about... I'm sorry, I just love metaphors. It get me so excited. Things get worse before they get better.
Mm-hmm.
Think about a spring. When you think things are getting worse, it creates pressure, tension. I'm loading that spring back, squeezing it down, pressing people into a corner. What's it going to do? Over time, it's going to continue to store that energy until one day it's going to fucking explode.
Yeah.
Like blow out of there. I may blow out of the socket that was even holding it in place.
Yes.
But the universe, creation, maintains balance. So as we drive ourselves to a brink of oblivion, not to saying that we should, it's not necessary to do so, but everything will become more difficult. Lessons will be learned harder. More lives will be lost. Okay? Evolution will slow, but after that, it will springboard. All right? It's like that diver getting ready to jump into the pool. Just a couple of hops, getting the momentum going, right? Pressure, more pressure, more pressure, lift off. That's what happens. That's that sort of metaphor. Physics can explain a lot of these different things. And when you have heat and pressure, what happens? The molecules are flying back and forth, rubbing, creating this friction, creating this heat. Same thing that happens in a microwave. Okay?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Why do you think the world feels like it's in chaos all the time? There's friction. They're rubbing back and forth at a high rate. There's no equalization that's actually happening. There's no coolness, fluidity to the nature like the smoke we have here burning with the incense. All right? It's erratic. So that pressure, that erraticism, all that gets built up, and then all that bad has to lead to something good in the end. Who knows how long it'll take, but we're really storing up a big old charge.
So if we go back to nature and we look at proportions of everything, and we understand that in nature there's all these calling cards that draw us to understanding, and we know scientists and biologists and philosophers have all studied this, is this ability for us to be able to recognize the most advanced patterns in the universe. And as we become more enlightened and as we begin to look, we can see like that there's this, even the celestial bodies, we look at those and stars and we see patterns and we
Thank
have
you for
astrology.
calling it that.
Yeah. That's what it is. Yeah.
What's the
Yeah, explain that.
Well, what's the word you said second?
Bodies.
Oh,
yeah.
That's interesting. It's a planetary body. It's a human body. It's a plant body. It's a corpus of thought, a corpus of people. Very interesting.
Well, each planet has a collective consciousness, so, with different densities according to Ra.
Well, planets are all living, aren't they not?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And if you look at that, depending on the size of the planet, it's going to carry different ratios.
Mm-hmm.
Geometry changes depending on sizing, fractals, all those specific things. And when you look to the ratios of life, it's not like we came in and defined them and said, oh, this is math. These things, perfection already existed. We just needed a way of explaining it with geometry. But that's just looking at it in the material sense. And I want to talk about this in both ways. We'll make a transition here, and I want you to get into some of the details on this. And then I'll talk about the non-physical sense of it.
Yeah, but I think when we look at this innate proportion and maintaining...
Proportion's a ratio.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm getting into, to maintain balance.
Well, yeah, that's what ratios do. It's what's the balance between these two things. How asymmetrical might it be? How many of this can fit into that? How do I take different things of different correlations and look at the ratios and balance between those? If I... someone, you know what a fulcrum point is?
Mm-hmm.
So if I have a fulcrum, and there's a long board on it, depending on the weight, how much weight I put into something on either end can determine how far out I can have that board on either side. Or if it's of equal weight, then I can balance it. or depending on where that weight, is sitting, the distance relative on that board. Think about that ratio in terms of your life. How much weight do I want to give to specific areas of my life? Specific thoughts, specific actions. These ratios are what define a human being. And now up here on the TV, we have the Vitruvian Man. This was drawn by Leonardo da Vinci. I think it was just in pencil. Maybe he did it in ink. But in the very, very material sense, he was looking at the perfection of proportion, of design of the material human body. The balance of these things. Fitting the man within a circle within a square, right? And the circle within a square, that's how they did the original calculations of pi, which are still a little bit off, But that is what's going on here. Is like, how do we find that perfect ratio in the material sense? And a lot of that happened during the Enlightenment era of Italy,
right,
back in 1600s or whatever it was. So it's like, how do you not only carry that perfection in the material, but also carry it into the immaterial? And that's what I want to discuss here today. So let's start with some examples of how we see ratios within nature.
Yeah.
No, how we even use them today, right? And then I'll talk about the definition of how ratios described here in this book that I'd read.
Well, I love honeybees.
I know you
do. So if you divide the female bees by the male bees in any given hive, you can go anywhere in the world, take a hive, and you can divide the male bees with the female bees, you will get exactly 1.608.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Sunflowers, which have opposing spirals of seeds, have a 1.618 ratio between the diameters of each rotation. And we can see this constantly. We got knotless shells, the list goes on and on.
Mm-hmm.
If you measure from your shoulder to your fingertip, like we see here.
Yep.
And then divide this number by the length from your elbow to your fingertips. Or you can measure from your head to your feet and divide that by the length from your belly button to your feet. 1.618.
The body's built into ratio.
Yeah.
So are all these other things you see in nature. So where you see the ratio of spacing with atoms.
Mm-hmm.
Electrons flying around, like their distance from certain things. Their speeds, the speed of light. All of these things are built into ratio. They're built into geometry. Math can be explained visually. Mm-hmm. Nature explains itself visually. You can see it. And the things you can't see, they can be felt. Those things that are felt also have their own ratios. That's what we need to continue to have that focus on. So, for instance, if you're in finance, you know this one.
Mm-hmm.
You used to trade Forex. People use this thing called the Fibonacci ratio.
Yes.
So there's a mathematical sequencing of how certain spiral patterns would grow out of nature.
Yeah, and you can also look at it with like charts. So you would have and usually how they do it is, and you can get charts that have this where it's 38.2, 50, and then 61.8.
Yeah.
And then you can look at entering and exiting a trade based off of those.
And it's fractal too. So if I zoom in, whether it's
right.
a day trade or I'm doing a month or long-term trading, those are going to have its own ratios within those ratios.
Right.
So a ratio does not exclude, if you have a ratio in the microcosm, it does not exclude it from being a ratio in the macrocosm.
Right.
It's not a true ratio if it's not applied to both. That's a very important thought, right? That's that balance. That's a perfect equilibrium, cause and effect. As above, so below, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hermes Trismegistus. That's the idea around this. And so if I'm trying to make gains in the material world and finance using this ratio, I want to afford people the opportunity to listen to this episode and say, I want to make gains in my thought. I want to make gains in what it means to be a good human being. If I want a return on my life, like I want a return on my investment, I should probably look to this ratio of what I want to put weight towards, how I want to strike balance between my mind, my body, and my spirit. Is that clear?
Yeah, but I want us to look at it more in a deeply way. Whenever you look at, like, for instance, a peacock tail.
Oh, yeah.
And you see this, it seems like, it almost, because how many artists have tried to use the same pattern and colors? I mean, have you ever looked at a hummingbird really, really close?
I have.
You know
I've held one in my hand.
Yeah, and how beautiful they are and how the colors kind of transition on their body.
Mm-hmm.
You know, birds are this way. Orchids, you know, the flowers. They even have, whenever you begin to look at even like aphids and how aphids, the little aphids, you know, like they'll go on a rose or on any type of leaf, they will follow the veins that are put, you know, like we have veins in our bodies, so do leaves have veins on them.
Well, mosquitoes follow our veins.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, how do they know that?
Mm-hmm.
And even, you know, like if you look at aphids on a sycamore leaf, they divide into polygons on the veins.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So how do they automatically know how does that just happen like that?
Yeah, how does it just happen like that? Think about they're sensing the geometry of life.
Yes.
I forget what the name of the planet is that has that weather pattern on top that's a hexagon.
Yeah.
Is it Jupiter?
Yeah, I think it is, yeah.
Jupiter has it on there.
So large, yeah.
Yeah. And it's massive, but it's a hexagon that sits on top. Even if you do a time series photograph, a time lapse, it still maintains that shape. It's not rotating, that's just the shape. It has that sort of energetic output. Energy wants to have that shape. And the thing is, we choose throughout our life to mash things up and have it look like this weird, like amoeba. We destroy this structure that is there really for our benefit. Like if you look at a creational law being a piece of geometry, that's what I would want to build my house with. I know it'll build a strong foundation, but if I'm over here just working a piece of clay and it's just like a mess, there's no real good way to fit it together. There's no strength between those vertices.
Yeah, but look at topology and maps.
Sure.
I mean, we're mapping out the world.
Yeah.
Think about that.
It's amazing.
And how are we doing that with geometry?
Yeah, well, geometry is it's a measure of that.
Yes.
So now that I've mapped it, now I need to measure that map. What's the distance? What's the size? What's the height? What's the growth? All these specific things. And so we're doing that so much with the outside world. I want to transition people then over to their inner world. How do you look at those measures internally of the self? Using that tool of self-awareness that you have, how do you concentrate upon it? And so now what I want to do here is I want to dig into this definition of this book I'm reading called The Psyche. And it's ratio, and even in German it's die ratio, D-I-E beforehand, right?
Because this book has German and then it has an English translation on one side.
Right.
And so it's a parallel.
Yeah. The reason they do that is because German has the ability to expound upon ideas that do not translate very well into English.
Yes.
So they thought the literature would have lost value if it didn't have the original German with it. So this is how ratio is described here, and we can break this down, and I know you'll be able to make some connections with this, Jason. It says the human being has something in his or her spirit consciousness and in his or her material consciousness that fundamentally first makes them into the human being. So namely, their rationality, their intellect, their sageness, and their morals. So there is a balance. There are ratios between your rationality, your intellect, your sageness, how wise you choose to be with that, and then how you apply those morals. Do I want to have big morals, or do I want to keep that ratio really small? If I have a high intellect, right? I am rational, but I have low morals. I can be a very selfish person.
Yes.
Where's the balance in that? I can harm. I can think that the hierarchy is a better ratio for myself. And it says that all these factors together, one names ratio. So the combination of those things is ratio itself. So ratio is this idea of the application and balance of these. How much you want to actually put into, how much weight is in each of these categories of rationality, intellect, sageness, and morality. If now the word ratio is employed in the future in the study material instead of intellect, rationality, morals, and sageness, etc., then you know what is meant by it. So you can learn a lot from books, but the real ratio of knowledge and understanding is an internal happening that is going to occur. You can have all the intellect in the world that you've gained from the outside. You can have all the experience, but the use, how you've actually seeded it inside yourself and then decide to apply that application of that ratio determines the ratio of a human being. So the higher that ratio, the more truthful you are of what it means to be a human being. So it says, therefore, the factor ratio is not only to be found in the spirit, but even also in the material area of the consciousness form. How much do I want to open up the pathway from the spirit, my energy inside, the part of creation, into my thoughts? How do I strike a balance between those two things? And then it maintains to say that the main task of the ratio embodies itself in remedying damaging arising ideas. So the stronger your ratio, the more you can prevent ill thoughts from plaguing your body, plaguing your organs, plaguing your thought patterns in your subconscious. The higher, the stronger that ratio is, the more true, evolutive, and progressive you can be as a human being. It fulfills this task as long as it is an awakened state. So as long as I am conscious of rationality, intellect, sageness, and my morals, the balance of those things, creating that ratio, that sits in the awakened state. Now I'm actually using it for the benefit of evolution of myself and others that interact with me.
Yes, that makes sense. Yeah.
Is this making sense?
Yeah. I just feel like we're like blowing across people's heads here because this is really, really deep, bro.
I know. But, you know, the point is...
And it's very, very technical.
It is. But these things take time. They're all interconnected. They require thought. They require rumination.
So I want to go back to the ratio with the spirit.
Yeah.
Because I think this is really, really important. And then because you mentioned, let's pause right here, because you mentioned my thought processes with my spirit and then creating that ratio. And the ratio, like you said, could be less or could be more. Mm-hmm. So let's make that connection between thought and spirit.
Okay. So
let's kind of go down. Let's go down to the ground, not be in the clouds as much.
Spirit is part of creation.
Right.
Okay. I'll take us out of the clouds. So there's energy that animates your body, animates your organs, animates your thought. That's what spirit is. Infinitely dense.
It's creational energy?
Yes. It's like a fusion reactor that sits inside of your body. Okay. Much like the fusion process that happens in the core of the earth, creating the electromagnetic output. So we have those rings, those poles. If I live a life of polarity, if I have a positive and a negative side, it's the same thing that the earth has. It's a celestial body. It's a human body. Everything has these polarities, these balances, electromagnetism in the material sense. So if I'm looking at my spirit, the spirit is this fusion reactor feeding everything. So if I want to put some energy into an idea, okay, my consciousness, to actually get my body to go do something, the spirit allows my thoughts to have power. And then from that power of the thought, I can then will something to happen.
Like we would call it motivation.
Like motivation.
Right.
Okay. So the spirit gives power to the thinking process that allows you to motivate yourself to go do something.
And it could be negative or positive polarity.
It could be negative or positive. It's a fusion reactor. Right?
It's like people always ask, how did Trump have so much energy being in his 70s?
Sure.
Well, he's fueled off of the negative energy from the crowds.
Yeah.
So that fuels him, and then that gives him, he's like a battery.
He's that fusion reactor. Oh, you want to feed more of this other side in?
Yeah.
Good. I'll use as much as I can.
And then the news media, all the hype he gets, you know.
Yeah. So if you're looking at it just from a material energy sense,
right,
that can feed that. But in the spiritual sense, the spirit is completely, how would I describe this? It's positive, neutral, equalized. It itself is not negative.
So how do I awaken that nuclear reactor that's in me?
The thing is, it's already awake. The thing that's not awake is your consciousness.
So that's creating that bridge.
It's that blocker.
Yes.
Remember your upper limit problem?
Yes.
Your upper limit problem is preventing the bridge between this thing that is constantly pumping out energy, thoughts, and ideas.
Right.
From the deepest levels of creation, and you're not listening to it.
Yeah. So me saying I'm not good enough, the spirit is looking at that. I'm pushing that energy down. And making that reactor weaker and weaker.
You love cantilever bridges, don't you?
Yeah, of course.
It's a ratio of weight to length.
Yes.
Is it not? Mm-hmm. My ratios are off. I can't make a bridge to my spirit. My consciousness.
That makes sense.
It's not making that bridge. It's not allowing me to will things to happen that need to be willed to happen.
So building a bridge.
Yeah.
And getting the right ratio. Does he talk about like practical steps and understanding, not an understanding, but in doing these daily doings of understanding? And I'm not just talking about spirit, because this affects, our mental, physical, spiritual lives, all it affects all aspects of it.
I'm glad you asked, because I read about this earlier. I quote what he wrote here. How to make this happen shall be taught here. Distracted, ill, and irresolute, everyday, unlucky, and undecisive thinkers shall become powerful, concentrated, and conscious natural thinkers. This is what they'll do. But how do they get there?
So it's Murphy's Law.
Hold on. You're going to like this. Natural thinkers, for the reason that nature itself teaches this value. We can also call them thinkers of life or conscious thinkers because they also teach in the same way. Nature teaches you. Mm-hmm. And by recognizing it, it's a learn-teach aspect. However, since the thought represents a tremendous might, lots of strength just in thinking alone, we will use the term might-oriented thinking. And might-oriented thinking is translated essentially as right life creational thinking. So when you ask me, what is the process to build that bridge? It's to look at nature and realize that you are one with nature. You are one with creation. That is that great bridge builder. That is how you recognize that ratio. And we hammer this point all the time because it can be observed. This idea that people have of a God creating that measure for them, telling them what that ratio is absurd. Where's the measuring stick? My measuring stick is exactly what's around me. Looking at nature, observing myself and the things in my environment, observing my thoughts.
So let's, in this ratio, and let's looking at nature, I want to get into symmetry.
Symmetry is fantastic.
I think this is so important.
Well, use your plastic surgeon idea about this.
Yeah, Fibonacci sequence. Some of the top plastic surgeons and these celebrities go to, and you can look this up online. They use this sequence, this golden ratio, to design people's faces.
Yeah.
And then we look at it, and a perfectly symmetrical face is attractive to us.
Correct.
But you know, like looking at symmetry, and I want to play this because I want to not just give the science in this. When we look to nature, I want to bridge it to what they're saying in that book, and I want people to understand it's like bilateral symmetry. When you look at bilateral symmetry, a tiger's face is perfect for that.
Correct.
If we can look at a tiger and you see that middle and
the stripes, the splitting,
the stripes, and then it's perfectly on each side. You can see starfish; they have fivefold symmetry. You can also see it in flowers and fruits. Sixfold symmetry is done in snowflakes. It's like not every snowflake is. Snowflakes alone show the power of creation. I mean, I'm just mesmerized every time I see how beautiful a snowflake is.
They all share the same constructive laws that build their geometry, but they're all individuals.
And it's like crystals, like some like fluorite, how they show the cube. You know, and they'll build natural cubes.
It's amazing.
It seems like it's like
the mineral,
a water splash creates radial symmetry.
I know.
The splash creates like this perfect circle around
those ripple effects.
Yeah, and then you have like sea amoebas, you have rotational symmetry. So symmetry, and this is where we're going to shift right to the book right here. Symmetry has a variety of causes. So we're looking at the law of cause and effect.
GT, this is great. That law of cause and effect, that snowflake, let's finish off this definition of ratio. The ratio is developed differently with each human life form, much like the snowflake. All bound by these ratios and this geometry, but the way they develop are completely individualized. This is because through the external, so whether it's wind or other atmospheric patterns or things that happen in your life on the outside, and internal education, and through the entire earth life and experience is made into that, what it is. And what it is that snowflake. What it is that human being. And that is dependent on the things that it begins to interact with. Bound by these ratios, bound by this geometry of creation and nature, you decide what that foundation and what that house will look like. You decide what the shape of that snowflake will look like. You are an individual, but bound by these creational laws, these pieces of nature that define what the definition or look and feel of what you are as a human being choose to be. That's what it is. So what you choose to experience, how you choose to live within this ratio in your intellect, rationality, sageness, and morality, all of these are the aspects that will define the shape, the outcome of Jason Rigby, the outcome of Alexander. These are the things that will craft you over the course of your life. These are the things that will chisel away all the things that are not required, the things that slow you down, the things that are inefficient, the things that don't truly define you. That ratio is that great artist. Creation is built into it. And let it continue to create. Create with it. Create who you are supposed to be. And that starts from the moment your spirit enters into that body and the moment it chooses to leave that body. So how you define to live that life through your morals, intellect, rationality, and sageness, that will define the shape of your snowflake.
So when we look at, this is so good. We're getting really deep here and I love it. When we look at, like you just mentioned, reincarnation, let's start there. And we see fractals.
Yeah.
And I hate when people say this person's enlightened, like past tense, or like they've got the fullness of, because it's like peeling an onion. It's a fractal. You'll never. We can read all the books we want. We can read every book that's here.
Yeah.
I have enough books to last me a lifetime. I could read every single one of them, and I would just be breaking the surface. And Leonardo da Vinci said this: all the branches of a tree at every stage of its height, when put together, are equal in thickness to the trunk.
I'm sorry. Please say that again. I had never heard that before. And I'm just trying to
Leonardo da Vinci, because he was studying enlightenment and understanding this, because this is important with what they're saying right now, and I want people to understand. We're gonna get really deep right now. Are you ready, bro?
I'm trying to understand. Help me understand. This is people on the show. They're like, help me understand.
That's what we're gonna do. So Leonardo da Vinci said this: all the branches of a tree at every stage. So all and every. Big keywords. All the branches of a tree at every stage of its height.
Got it.
No. This is another key. This is a brilliant quote. When put together, are equal in thickness to the trunk.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at a tree outside while you were telling. I love looking at this tree outside. I want to name that tree. But I can see if I were to take those branches and bundle them together, that it is the thickness of that trunk. But what's the important fact about this?
Well, when you take the little branches, and you can get a bundle of branches together, and you can go to those child branches, those small branches.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a tree basically sitting in my house here, a small one, a tropical tree, and I can take those and it will match up with the parent branch.
But what's the most important part, though? It's not the fucking tree or the branch, and I don't want to miss this.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Is that he looked to nature to explain life.
Yes.
It wasn't some highfalutin philosophy. It wasn't something unrealistic or flowery or oversold. It wasn't something that was overly positive, overly negative. It was just like, let me look as to what nature is showing me directly, what I can observe and know for a truth.
But don't you think that our creational evolutional learning is fractal in the sense through reincarnation?
Of course it is.
Yeah.
It's all these lives of these branches that come together to create that trunk.
Yes.
That thickness, that sturdiness of the spirit. All those lives, right? It's all those branches that come out and stem from that one initial thing, and that's the source. Is that clear?
Yeah, no, that's very clear. And when you look at clouds, river networks, geological fault lines, mountains, coastlines, animal coloration, snowflakes, crystals, blood vessel branching, ocean waves, it's all showing you what you should be, or what you are. Not what you should be, but what you are.
Yeah.
Like whenever you go to the beach, why do you feel so amazing when that sun is setting and you're looking out over the waves?
Because you're looking at yourself.
Yes.
You're looking at your true self.
You're looking at creation in its infinite. Why is it so peaceful?
Why?
Because we're submitting to creation. That's the life that you can live. You don't have to go to the ocean.
No.
You don't have to go hop on a plane and go to, like, here's our closest ocean is probably San Diego. We can hop on a plane and in an hour and a half we're in San Diego to get an Uber, and next thing you know, you're at the beach.
Yeah.
Literally within 2 or 3 hours.
Correct.
You were just in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Beaches all around.
All around, the whole thing.
Yeah. I don't have to go there and look at that. I don't have to go to India and go talk to a guru. I don't have to read a book. It's in us. Like you said, that nuclear reactor. And I want us to look into this a little bit more heavier because there's something very, very important. I don't know if he talks about this in here. And this is what I want to bring up for the end of the show. Whenever you were talking about that eternal spirit and then alignment with creation.
Yep.
The key to having this, because you want leadership, you want influence, you want all these practical things. It's you radiating. It's that infusion, that reactor working at its most efficient to create energy. Because that's what I love. Nuclear reactor. That was perfect.
Thank you.
It's creating that energy and powering those things around you.
And what happens when you don't have the right transmission lines? What happens when you haven't built the infrastructure to take the energy from the core and send it out?
The geological fault lines.
Yeah.
The rivers. It shows it all. The veins in our body.
Yeah, it's all there. It's all there. You just have to wake up to it.
How do you submit to nature?
How do I submit to it?
Because I think that's the key.
Or how do you...
Are you one with nature?
I just wouldn't call it a submission. Because submission is like this idea of hierarchy, right? Nature has no hierarchy.
I'm thinking of not... okay, let me say it this way. I'm thinking of not resisting nature.
Yeah, how do you not resist
so
it?
That's why I'm saying submit to it. But resistance...
I understand. Yeah. How do you stop resisting something like that? Well, stop resisting your thoughts. Let them flow. Stop putting things in buckets statistically. That's good, that's bad. I've had more bad thoughts today than good thoughts. They're thoughts.
You're damming up that flow.
You're damming it all up. You're not really building a bridge.
And that dam is creating this
pressure.
Negative, the pressure and
Remember
the negative
I talked about
polarity.
that spring?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Same thing, yeah.
It's the same thing. Everything's a good old metaphor, right?
Yeah, everything is, yeah.
Don't resist the metaphors. Don't resist the truth that's around you. Just take the time, be patient, and ask yourself, how long does it take you to stare at a rock or an ant or a blade of grass to realize the true beauty of creation?
Yes.
How long will it take you to sit there until you see everything in this universe that's in that rock? How long will that take? And I would challenge you to sit down and do that very thing.
Take the headphones off.
Watch an
Sit
ant
on a
move.
big granite rock.
Think about it. Think about how a hair follicle is designed. A pine needle. These small, small things, but when you step back out of the forest, it becomes this massive, beautiful picture. But foundationally, these very, very tiny things are what make up all of it.
Yeah, and when you look at, when you're sitting on your computer and you're frustrated and you look out your window and you see trees and grass and clouds, there's this, it's almost like, do you stop and meditate or do you just focus on that and then recognize that you have oneness with those things and that it's eternal and you are eternal?
Start with recognizing the fact that you want to put your attention out there. Recognize the fact that nature has called your attention more than this laptop in front of you. Think about that moment.
The trees are gonna be there forever. The laptop
is temporary.
Yeah, temporary. There's gonna be new things.
Creation stays. This goes.
Technology.
Don't put value in things that rust. Right?
Yeah.
Who's your guy that likes to say that?
Jesus. Yeah. He said things that moths and rusts can destroy.
That's correct. So if you have a thought that rusts, just consider that.
So thinking, and let's close out on this. So, because we talked about this last episode, I encourage people to our Carl Jung episodes. That was the first one we did this last episode. So thinking, because I want to leave somebody super practical. Ratios and thinking. Well, because everybody's going to look to it and say, is there a right ratio? How do I get my ratio of spirit and thought? And, you know what I'm saying? We almost like, we overcomplicate things.
You know how a balance beam works?
Yeah.
If I'm going to walk across it, I don't want to lean too much to one side, right?
So creating balance.
You know, like riding a bicycle, where the balance is made. You feel it subconsciously. Don't overthink the ratio. recognize when things become out of balance. You'll be able to feel it.
Well, that creational energy spirit would automatically bring you in alignment with the proper ratio.
Right. So you'll know when you
that's what I
begin
was
to
getting at,
lose that feeling, that fine spiritual perceptive feeling.
I like that you said spine.
Spine. Well, a lot of it does come from the spine, right?
We don't realize with the chakras and
all the kundalini and that energy that wraps right up through that crystalline bone structure.
That's just that I don't want to use the word summoning, but that's just coming in touch with that creational energy. That's all that is.
And you'll know when you start to step out of touch. That tells you your ratio's off. And the things that happen externally in your life, positive or negative, that also gives you a nice gauge of where your ratio is.
But it's as simple as listening to uplifting music before you come into work. Music has that tendency to do that because it's patterns, it's fractals, it's sine waves, it's vibration.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. It's like you're feeling shitty, throw some freaking music on.
Right. And then think about why the music made you feel better.
Mm.
Oh, interesting.
We won't go into that.
No, we won't go into it, but that's where we're at. So consider the ratio, be the Vitruvian person in the material sense and the sense of your thoughts.
So how can we help out this organization where you got your book from?
So this organization is by Figu Landsgruppe. It's in Hinterschmidrudi, Switzerland. And you can...
Is there a website?
Yeah, figu.org, figu.org. And you can donate to them or you can buy their books. And by buying their books, it's just as supportive.
Mm-hmm.
And whether one person does it or 1,000, when you've changed one person's mind, you've doubled essentially the thought power.
And that one's called The Psyche.
This one's called The Psyche.
Perfect. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.